For the people here, it could be favorable thermodynamical conditions for ice supersaturation. That was quite exciting to discover that. Planet encircling dust storms have been extensively now studied, but their effects on the upper atmosphere were not well known. We made few discoveries about it, which I'm going to show today. Atmospheric escape is another topic that MAVEN-like missions have provided incredible amount of information. I mean, it's just we are starting to scratch the surface of the problem. And finally, I have to mention water is absolutely an exciting topic on Mars. I mean, there was a puzzle of what happened to water on Mars. What is going on with the water budget? So there's ice, obviously water ice, but also water vapor on Mars. It's not a lot, but water vapor, water is a thermodynamically an important chemical species, and it can be transported, but it is also radiatively active. So it can undergo chemical reaction, basically actually sort of a photodissociation reaction in the ionosphere, in ionospheric altitudes on Mars, so that you have essentially hydroxyl and hydrogen, which are the constituents of the water molecule. They are just freely floating in the upper atmosphere. They can be transported. Hydrogen meaning just the H, the hydrogen atom. So that is a subject of research of great importance for the Martian aeronomy, upper atmosphere. So that's probably I will focus on the right-hand side of this slide, MAVEN observations, and I will conclude with transport of water vapor. Just a lot of chemistry there, and I will also briefly mention it. So we have a working global circulation model of Mars as well as Earth, but the Martian model is a unique one that we have in-house because it has water chemistry in an unprecedented detail. Water molecules can be transported, they can chemically react, but of course radiation impacts water because of water has so many lines, right? Radiative lines. It undergoes radiative transfer, and especially Lyman alpha radiation is so important for water. So, okay, so research interest, I essentially summarize them. We have a spectrum of topics. It's not an extensive list, but this is more or less, these are the topics that our group and our collaborators have substantial contribution to. It starts with gravity waves, clouds, dust storms, atmospheric escape, that's coupling basically into space, hurricanes, eclipses. We study solar stratospheric warmings, sudden stratospheric warmings. So the non-underlined ones are mainly terrestrial topics, Earth topics. Like magnetic storms. Although actually we have done some studies of electron density distribution and response to crustal magnetic fields. On Mars, we have crustal magnetic fields. They are localized fields, not global. But it turns out that it has an impact on the ionosphere, and through the ionosphere, it has impact on the neutrals. Interesting effects. Yeah, we also study tides, solar tides, and so on and so forth. Basically, various aspects of dynamical and thermodynamical, and to some extent, chemical coupling. And I do find the chemical aspects very interesting because there's a lot of unexplored physics there. And I do remember in an offline talk conversation with Daniel Tang, and then I said, I think dynamicists and chemists, physical chemists, should team up to jump on these really complex physics and physical chemistry problems related to the transport of important molecules and the types of chemical reactions they undergo, and the effects of environmental circumstances like waves, temperature variations, turbulence on chemical reactions. Some of these topics are unexplored. So I'm really excited about that. At a fundamental level, we also study astrophysical and geophysical fluids in the solar system and beyond. Basically, I'm interested from how the fluid dynamics of accretion disks work in the astrophysical context, but also how, for example, tides and gravity waves interact with each other and provide feedback on the mean flow. Right. So I still am active in the NASA Golden Icon satellite mission. Icon has been decommissioned, but the data is available there. There's still a lot of research activity going on. Gold mission is up and running. The last time I checked it, unless we have a mega superstorm and it's gonna knock out the gold instrumentation, I don't know. And I'm a faculty liaison, so we work closely with NASA's ionosphere, thermosphere, and mesosphere lab, and with the researchers there. And the lab has the code 6785. So I'm really excited about expanding that network and also connecting to other labs at NASA. So I occasionally work as a contractor there, and besides basic science projects with the colleagues there. COSPAR, I'm really involved in COSPAR for actually many years. Right now, I'm one of the vice chairs of Commission C. That Commission C is specialized on space studies of upper atmospheres of planets and Earth, including reference atmospheres. Those are reference atmosphere. There are reference atmospheric models like IRI and MSIS and these kind of things. So it is in the interest of the Commission C to manage those reference atmospheric models. And then recently, I'm supposed to do something for the Space Weather Lab as a director. Right. So this slide probably summarizes the essential physics that we are interested in. So we're looking at whole atmosphere coupling from all the way from the troposphere up to higher altitudes.
This is for Earth for Mars.
This is for Earth. I have also a similar figure for Mars that's going to come up. So this is for Earth because essentially on Earth we have many observations, and there are models that are many years old, and they have been developed more. They have become sophisticated. So we use those models, those techniques, and apply in the planetary science context. And of course, there are also discoveries and methodologies that have been developed in the planetary science context independent of the terrestrial physics. But usually, I mean, at least in recent years, most of the discoveries have been made obviously on Earth, and then people checked, are there any similar physical processes or chemical processes elsewhere? So we've been motivated by what we are doing here on Earth, certainly. But again, there are exceptions to this development. There are some planets, some planetary systems in which we made discoveries that were unique to that system, that did not exist elsewhere. That crustal magnetic field situation is a good example because we have no idea from Earth. On Earth, we don't have a crustal magnetic field. We do have, but it's so weak. The global magnetic field is very strong, which is dipolar mainly. So it suppresses the effect of those small scale crustal fields. But on Mars, you don't have a global one, so you can clearly see the impact of the crustal field on the environment. So that's a very unique signature for another planet that doesn't exist on Earth. On the other hand, the way water is transported could be substantially different on Mars than on Earth. On Mars, we have discovered that water can be pumped, literally in quotation marks, can be pumped from the middle atmosphere into the thermosphere. That's a distance of maybe 50 to 100 kilometers of transport. It's a mixture of transport by circulation and molecular diffusion. So that kind of manifestation of transport of chemically active species, dynamically active species, we haven't really seen on Earth. Yeah, I mean, on Earth, we have NOx transport in the middle atmosphere, if I may give that example, NOx species, NO, that are very susceptible to transport, but it's not necessarily 100 kilometers transport all the way up. It's transported within the middle atmosphere. It doesn't really go much into the upper thermosphere. So there are many other examples we can talk about. So I will skip some of the material of that repeats itself. So essentially, we are interested in the state and evolution of the atmosphere and ionosphere system from the surface to the top, looking at coupling from below by waves, and then coupling from above, meaning solar, magnetospheric, and geomagnetic processes, which is nowadays referred to as space weather. So we find ourselves right in the middle of these two disciplines. The first is the meteorology, looking at the troposphere, and the other is the space weather, which is all the way up. So we're in the middle, trying to find the links, and yeah, doing our best to connect these different fields with each other. So because I wasn't sure how much you have been exposed to gravity waves, I wanted to just show this. So I apologize if this is too basic stuff. So gravity waves are everywhere in the atmosphere of planets because planetary atmospheres are stratified. That means their layers, their atmospheric layers, are basically piled on top of each other. Stratification, that's what it means. It has a structure in the vertical direction. Gravity waves are generated by meteorological processes, so they will be present in all atmospheres because all planetary atmospheres have weather. Literally no exception. Maybe Mercury, which has a sort of a semi-transient atmosphere, it's too close to the sun, and maybe it has a very different type of weather, probably space weather only. So you can see the gravity wave signatures here in the clouds because of the condensation signature. So these waves have scales all the way from 10 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers. So quite a broad spectrum of waves. And we need really ultra high resolution models to resolve these waves. Otherwise, we need parametrizations. So they grow in amplitude exponentially with height. And at greater altitudes, like the mesosphere and the thermosphere, they become extremely important in thermodynamically, as well as electrodynamically. You cannot run away from gravity waves if you want to study planetary middle and upper atmospheres. That brings me to this fun internal gravity wave article in planetary atmospheres that we wrote. We called it Obscure Waves in Planetary Atmospheres from 2019. It was in this issue, and it was highlighted in the cover of the Physics Today magazine. It's a widely circulated magazine around the world among physicists. So it was really fun to write this article. It's supposed to be, it's written for the general physics community. So if you're not a planetary scientist, you should be able to appreciate why gravity waves are important after reading this article. If you cannot appreciate that, that means the article has not achieved its goal. If I may go into some technical details, just very, very briefly, what we are doing in terms of modeling, right? I know this is an essential topic to you guys and to us as well. And the modelers have a common language. We look at individual processes in a systematic way. In the context of gravity waves, atmospheric gravity waves, we split the problem at least into 5 sectors. First, we have to understand how gravity waves are generated in the lower atmosphere. They are generated by meteorology, by weather. Instabilities you get a spectrum of waves. After that, we have to study how these waves grow. Yeah, what happens to them? How their amplitudes grow. We quantify gravity wave activity in terms of amplitude, but also momentum flux. Momentum flux is a fluid dynamical concept, so it expresses exactly what it says. It's the flux of momentum transport. After the growth, we need to know how the waves dissipate. They dissipate because of viscosity and nonlinear interactions. So this nonlinear wave-wave interactions is a unique physical process that is included in our modeling approach. It's not really widespread. It's quite a complicated technique that we implemented there. It comes from the plasma physics, but it works really beautifully. After the dissipation, then you exactly know what the effects of waves are, because they basically decelerate or accelerate the atmospheric circulation, or they can heat and cool the atmosphere, but they can mix. And I can tell you, this mixing induced by gravity waves is a hot research topic. The community is growing, but there's a lot of work to do there. I personally am interested in the fundamental physics of this, how this mixing works, and the whole atmosphere. Is there a similarity between tropospheric mixing versus thermospheric mixing induced by gravity waves? What are the key parameters there, you know? Some of which we understand. We are slowly starting to understand this. It's basically turbulence physics. Whenever you have correlation of two parameters, two fluctuations in space and time, you may get a transport of a given quantity. But that transport could be irreversible, meaning, for example, you get, let's take any important, chemically important molecule in the middle atmosphere, like ozone. I don't know. Let's take ozone. Ozone can be transported to some extent if it's not, for whatever reason, chemically active for a period. It will be transported. That transport could be reversible. So it could be, for example, transported, let's say, from the equator to the north, to the pole via the horizontal circulation, but it could be also transported by waves. That transport could be also in the other direction. So northward transport could cancel southward transport. So that doesn't produce a net effect. If two transport directions cancel each other, if waves transport ozone and towards north, and then sometime later they do it towards south, those two transport processes will cancel each other. For a net transport to happen, you must have a divergence of the flux of the chemical species. And that is an extremely fundamental characteristics of how wave-induced or turbulence-induced transport of species work. So after calculating the effects, we get the changes that we can implement into our global scale model. Changes occur in circulation, temperature, density of chemical species, and also you may have an impact on the chemistry, meaning some chemical processes could be accelerated, some could be decelerated, and so on and so forth. So you need really a coupled system to do that. I forgot about this, yeah. If you would like to know more about global scale coupling on Mars, I really recommend this article that I wrote in 2023, which appeared in Nature Geoscience. The idea was exactly to do what I said, to bring the meteorological problems and space weather problems into one place, and then see how these things interact with each other. What's the problem in space weather on Mars versus what are the problems of Martian weather? Is there any connection there, type of? And water seems to be the connecting link, because water is affected by space and water is affected by weather too. Good. As promised, looking at Mars now, this is the entire atmosphere of Mars from surface to the exobase. The exobase is between 225, 230 up to 300 kilometers. The mean exobase altitude is about 250. That means from 0 to 250 is the atmosphere of Mars. Above is literally space, because above the exobase, you don't have necessarily collisions of particles. It's collisionless environment. Or particles basically follow ballistic trajectories and they fall back into the atmosphere. Yeah. Above the exobase, escape happens at and above, which we're going to talk about. So I just took a small slice of the atmosphere and I just expanded it here. So gravity waves are generated in the troposphere above the boundary layer. What the atmospheric physicists call planetary boundary layer, PBL. You may have seen in textbooks. These waves propagate upwards, grow in amplitude, they produce effects. They can induce and enhance CO2, carbon dioxide, ice cloud formation because they strengthen supersaturation. MAVEN also showed, for example, between 160 and 220 kilometers, an extensive amount of gravity wave activity measured in terms of relative density perturbations. What you see here occasionally up to 300% of wave fluctuation. What does that mean? If the background is 1, the fluctuation is 3. So the fluctuation can be 3 times stronger than the background. This is incredible. It's unheard of. On Earth, definitely, we have no measurements showing like such strong gravity wave activity. And this is satellite observations of Mars. And we saw this already 10 years ago. So just briefly, I don't want to go into detail because this is really a lot of technical modeling stuff. On the left-hand side, I show you a summary of the whole atmosphere gravity wave parameterization or gravity wave model. What does it do? It calculates the gravity wave activity from the source all the way to the upper atmosphere. It uses horizontal wavelengths, momentum fluxes of gravity waves as input, and it produces gravity wave-induced heating, cooling, mixing, and acceleration, deceleration. On the right-hand side is the Martian general circulation model. Maybe that's could be interesting. At the moment, it goes from surface to about 160 kilometers, depending on the solar activity. This model obviously solves the Navier-Stokes equations, right? And energy and continuity equation. At the moment, we have only water chemistry. Mars has 95%, basically Mars atmosphere is 95% CO2. So there is not a lot of chemistry there. Less chemistry on Mars, obviously, than on Earth. Earth is more diverse in terms of the chemical species. Mars is less diverse, but there's, of course, interesting things going on there. We have limited grid. It's a coarse grids model, T21, if you are familiar with spectral general circulation models. But the good news is that this model can be expanded. So if we want to collaborate and you would like to, let's say you're interested in a specific chemical process like a methane physics, for example, right? Methane could be interesting on Mars, I reckon. But correct me if I'm mistaken. One could add those couple of reactions that could be important for methane into the model, and then we can look at these processes. It has very high resolution in the troposphere in the vertical direction, so it's extremely fine vertical resolution, like 100 meters or so in the vertical, because it has a stretch grid. Though some GCMs have stretch grids, some have condensed grids. So in the lower atmosphere, you would like to have condensed grid so that you can capture these small fluctuations. In the upper atmosphere, the grid is a little bit more stretched because you don't require that much condensation of the grid levels. The fluctuations are stronger in the upper atmosphere, and we can capture them with a vertical resolution of 2 kilometers. Yeah. Just an example of what we did with this model. Here in the first panel, I tried to darken the others ones, but it doesn't show well. You can see the pressure latitude distribution of Martian temperature from surface. That's 600 millibar is surface, and then 10 to the minus E5, 10 to the minus 5, yeah. Pascal is about 160, 150 kilometers. So temperatures are very cold, between 220 and 140 on Mars. But what we wanted to test is we wanted to include the effects of gravity waves. So here in this simulations, second simulation, panel B, we have the dynamical effects of gravity waves included, meaning acceleration and deceleration only. And then in the simulation C, third simulation, we included dynamical and thermal effects induced by gravity waves. What you see clearly is a cooling in the upper atmosphere, in the middle and upper atmosphere of Mars. Cooling is represented here by the color shading. Blue means colder temperatures. So the summary is gravity waves can cool the Martian middle and upper atmosphere by up to 45 Kelvin. So a net temperature change of minus 45 Kelvin is incredible. Guess what? So this is averaged over multiple sols, but specifically around solar longitude 270. So that's the position of Mars around the sun. It's still an average, longitudinally averaged representation here.
Colorful is Kelvin, the temperature in Kelvin, right?
Yeah, natürlich, of course. Temperatures in Kelvin. So if you look at the background temperature is between 200 and 150, and then temperature change induced by waves is 40 Kelvin, that's a lot of effects. But we were able to verify the role of gravity waves in cooling the Martian atmosphere by comparing it to nighttime observations of Mars Odyssey aerobraking mission or aerobraking campaign, I have to say. How did we do this? So you here have in the lower figure, also for the online people, is this figure we're talking about now. We have a temperature latitude variation of temperature as a function of latitude. The black curve, which is this one, is without gravity waves. What you see here is temperatures around 140 this is pole to pole, South Pole to North Pole. And it's modeling. The black is the modeling without gravity waves. Green is modeling only with dynamical effects of gravity waves. That's this. The red one now includes both dynamical and thermodynamical effects. As you can see now, we have cooling, especially around in the northern hemisphere, down to 120 Kelvin. But if you specifically look at the nighttime temperature, then you see very, very cold temperatures here, the red dashed line. And if you look at the observed nighttime temperature, which is the dotted blue one here, you see a very good correspondence between the simulations and the data. That pretty much for us made completely sense because the physics was already suggesting gravity waves must cool the upper atmosphere of Mars. And then data showed it. Just a glimpse into the ice cloud physics. what you see here is over 3 altitudes, 80, 100 kilometers, and 120 kilometers of temperature fluctuations produced by gravity waves, dynamical effects of gravity waves, and then in the third column here, you have the probability of carbon dioxide ice cloud formation. First of all, yes, please.
May I jump in for a sec? I'm sorry. There's a question from Gilran online.
Yeah, I am not able to see the questions. If you can help me with getting.
Sure, yes, absolutely. And Gilran, do you want to just ask the question? I think it might have been on his previous slide.
Yes.
Yeah. Previous slide, which altitude is shown such a zonal average temperature? Which altitude?
Yeah. Sorry, this was very quick. It's 120 kilometers at the moment, this one.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's an aerobraking mission, so it's basically an upper atmospheric measurement. It doesn't go all the way to the lower atmosphere. Thanks. Yeah, if there are any questions, please just interrupt me. You know. Oops, did I mess up? Okay, good. Ja, wunderbar. So what you see here in panels A, B, and C, that's the first column, temperature fluctuations up to 26 and more Kelvin. These are fluctuations produced by gravity waves. We know at those altitudes, 80 to 120 kilometers, it's basically the mesosphere, upper mesosphere, and the temperature is in the order of 120, 130 Kelvin. And the fluctuations produced by gravity waves is up to 30 Kelvin. Now you see how significant those numbers are. What I forgot to mention is that this is an entire year of Mars, 0 to 360 solar longitude. That's one revolution around the sun. In planets, we use this solar longitude concept instead of months, or because they don't have really a calendar there. We would like to know where the planet is with respect to the sun. I mean, if 0 is, for example, equinox, spring equinox, and then 90 is summer, and then 180 is the vernal equinox, and then 270 is the winter in the northern hemisphere. So just if you slice it into parts, that's how these planetary scientists do this. And you can associate this with that 0 to 360. For example, in the northern hemisphere, you look at here, 270, what would that be? That would be winter. 90 would be summer in the northern hemisphere, and so on and so forth. This is extremely important, briefly, because of the dust storm situation. Eccentricity of Mars is really much, much greater than Earth. It's one of the really planets with strong eccentricity. So the aphelion and the perihelion are very different from each other. This implies that the seasonal processes, the seasons are felt very different. In the northern hemispheres, the summer is not going to be the same as the southern hemisphere summer. On Earth, we know we know that's the case. I always give this simple example of Turkey is a Mediterranean country and Australia is another Mediterranean country. They have a similar climate, like in that, but the summers are not equal to each other. They're different, right? The differences in the seasons on Mars is huge. I mean, the southern winter on Mars is much colder than the northern winter. On the other hand, the southern summer is much hotter than the northern summer. That has an impact on the dust storms, because for dust you need tropospheric physicists know this well. You need dust lifting from the surface, because where does the dust come from? It comes from the surface of Mars. So you need hot temperatures, you need strong winds, and you get a lot of uplifting. And that's the reason why these global storms, global dust storms, are initiated mainly in the southern hemisphere of Mars during perihelion, basically during southern hemisphere summer. Yeah, perihelion is southern summer. Aphelion is northern summer. Okay. Since we mentioned dust, this is how Mars looks like, with and without dust. The 28th of May is just 3 days before the onset of the global planet encircling dust storm in 2018. The right one on the 1st of July is basically the situation after a month, right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's two different planets, right? But no, this is both of them are Mars. And here is the front, dust front, on the surface. What you see here is the surface of Mars here, and then this is the dust propagating towards this direction, towards left. And this is a scale of about 80 kilometers or so. I think I had looked it up somewhere. So you have dust fronts, many, many hundreds of kilometers. This is just a cut through it. Good. What else can you do with satellite measurements? So you're also experts in satellite observation. So that's, I'm sure, and I hope it's inspiring for you, is that you can measure gravity wave activity with satellites. We already mentioned it. What I did here is in a GRL paper, it's an old paper, is to look at altitude versus time in terms of Earth and Mars time. So Earth time is from 1st of May till September the 30th. As we just said, the global dust storm started here. Panel A, essentially, all these panels show gravity wave activity. Before the onset of the storm, you have weak gravity wave activity in the order of 10%, maybe 15 or so, occasionally up to 20. But with the onset of the storm, you have a doubling of the gravity wave activity. Right immediately after the 1st of, basically after the 1st of June, the gravity wave activity starts, peaks up, and then after a month, it reaches its maximum. So this tells us it takes about a month after the onset of the global storm for the wave activity to maximize. So interesting things must be happening at those maximum time, because 40% fluctuation is incredible. The whole atmosphere is just jumping up and down. Of course, you can look at this as a function of longitude. I really like dissecting the satellite data into pieces and parts and looking at the different views. So you have a longitude versus time distribution, and also local time versus time distribution. So because of the orbital trajectory of MAVEN, you do not have a full local time coverage. That's a fundamental limitation of satellite. One fundamental limitations of satellite observations. Don't expect to have full local time coverage. Unfortunately, then if we had the full local time coverage, yeah, there you go. You would have a model, but it's challenging. Nevertheless, certain local times are covered, which I put here. So essentially, during the evolution of the dust storm, also the local time is shifted towards the nighttime. So partially, the increase of the gravity waves during the storm is also associated with the change of the local time. Yeah, which is not a problem, but it should be kept in mind. Do you have a question? No? No. Right. Associated with this dust storm work, we were curious how gravity waves impact escape. It's an unexplored topic. Really, I recently started seeing articles on that. There was no understanding of what gravity waves are doing on atmospheric escape, meaning how does a gravity wave harmonic cause loss of a specific molecule into space in an irreversible way. Unknown. We didn't know. So what we did is we studied Jeans escape. Yeah, you may have heard of this, thermal escape. It's basically if just looking at the Maxwellian distribution of molecules, fast molecules have more energy and they can escape the gravitational field of a planet because they're fast. So those fast molecules, they are susceptible to escape. If temperature is pushed upwards by gravity waves, then they can much more easily escape to space. What we did in this numerical example is that we integrated the amount of escape produced by a gravity wave harmonic, by a single gravity wave. You have to do an integration because there is a positive phase in a gravity wave and there's a negative wave. It's a sine wave. You have to integrate. So the common sense could say, okay, in the positive phase, I have an increase of temperature. In the negative waves, I have a decrease of temperature. So the effects should cancel each other. The wave should not be doing anything, just up and down. But the physics works else in a different way because the process is nonlinear and gravity waves are nonlinear. If you do the integration through the entire phase of a gravity wave, you will see, yes, an enhancement of escape flux in the positive phase and a decrease of escape flux in the negative phase. They do not cancel each other. Therefore, a propagating gravity wave and dissipating gravity wave produces a net effect on net increase in escape flux, meaning more molecules are leaving into space because of gravity wave activity. I'll just skip this. By the way, we just produced the first global maps, like fully global maps of gravity waves on Mars in the thermosphere. And these are the 4 maps for different seasons. It's published in the Astrophysical Journal in 21. Yeah. So I think this summarized the story. Guys, what happens is that when you have these gravity waves in the lower atmosphere, they are initiated by convection, by weather, but also by dust storms themselves. Interesting. So dust storms also generate gravity waves, and gravity waves are coupled to dust storms. So these waves can propagate upwards. They can influence the meridional circulation on Mars. Meridional circulation and vertical advection are basically this pumping mechanism that we mentioned that can push water into the thermosphere of Mars. Otherwise, there is no water in the Martian thermosphere. The water must come from the lower atmosphere. And this is a transport mechanism. In the thermosphere, the water molecules can be dissociated into hydroxyl and hydrogen, among others. And hydrogen is a very radical molecule. It's susceptible to transport, and it can easily escape into space via thermal Jeans escape. And this escape is even more enhanced by the effects of gravity waves because of the mechanism that I said, I described. So this was appreciated in a science article some years ago, and still a mechanism that is being studied in detail. Finally, after this perspective article in Science, we said we have to prove this. Does this mechanism actually happens? And then colleagues in Russia and in Germany and myself, colleagues here, we basically teamed up a truly international effort to understand this. Because we have a ExoMars mission going on, and one of the instruments can measure water on Mars in the entire atmosphere of Mars, nearly. So we modeled this water transport. So I'm not gonna bother you with the details of this up and down flux. The bottom line is maybe no, this figure is great. This figure is great. So you have a pumping mechanism. Water is being pushed upwards at equatorial latitudes on Mars from the middle atmosphere into the thermosphere, and then it's distributed latitudinally towards higher latitudes, and then some of that water can sink back towards the middle. So you have this pumping mechanism, and these lines are streamlines, fluid dynamical streamlines. They represent basically transport, upward flux of water. So the modelers can they can be quite practical guys. They say, okay, why don't we model upward flux and then we model downward flux separately? Yeah, if there's no transport, then up cancels down. So in the model, you can separate them. This is the fun exercise. So that's the essence of these two different figures. There's one upward flux and then downward flux. So if you synthesize these two, then you will see there is more upward flux and less downward flux, but both happen. So it should not be misleading when we say upward water transport. We're not saying that water molecules or water vapor just move upwards. It is a net effect. There is some upward flux and there's some downward flux. And if you model it, you will see they both happen. But if there's more upward flux, then you get a net transport into the thermosphere. There you go. And
Erdal,
yeah, with that?
could I jump in with a quick question here?
Absolutely. Please do
Yeah.
that.
My question is how similar is this Mars gravity wave pumping of the water flux similar to what we experience on Earth, like in the tropical upper troposphere, lower stratosphere circulations? Because I mean, it looks somewhat similar, right? And it's a critical process on Earth, right, to manage the heat energy mass balance.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a really nice comment and question. There's a similarity there. You have basically Hadley cells are, I think they're called Hadley, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Quite fundamental transport cells in planetary atmospheres. And they are of different strength and magnitude and extent in different planets. On Mars, it is quite a strong one because Mars is a very dynamical planet. Winds are in the order of maybe twice as strong as on Earth, I would say, at least twice. Gravity waves are the same. At least gravity waves actually are 10 times stronger on Mars than Earth. Winds are in the order of twice, maybe stronger on Mars. So you're gonna expect a very strong circulation and that equator to pole circulation, poleward. And this is the basically part of the meridional circulation that I'm talking about. That's driven by gravity waves as well as seasonal effects. So there is a similarity. There's some comparative planetology that could be done there in terms of the water transport. I am not sure on Earth how effectively water is redistributed. I haven't really looked at that, but I'm sure you guys have looked at it. It could be some interesting comparison there. Could be done.
Yeah, and I think maybe my corollary was the condensation in the tropical regions and the strong convection and the sort of the pumping of water that penetrates through the tropopause into the stratosphere in those regions, and it's in like the top of like really high ice clouds above this convection. Maybe that's a little bit different than general circulation, but anyway, I'll let you continue. This just looks, interestingly similar.
Yeah, it is. There's definitely a connection that upwards circulation around the equator, and then sort of the poleward motion, and then downward transport at, let's say, low to mid latitude sector. So you have this the Ferrel cells and then Hadley cells. You don't exactly have the same circulation on Mars, but you have a very huge equator to pole cell, basically. Very strong Hadley cell. That's dominant in distribution of chemical species like water and others, trace gases, so to speak. like methane maybe. We haven't really looked at methane because we haven't included methane chemistry. It's a great question.
Okay, thank you. That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is just a supplementary material. I think what I did here that could interest you is the connection between water vapor in ppmv and then the circulation that I had shown. So in summary, maybe we also, so water is being pumped upwards and it's depleted in the mesosphere. It's transported up. The red means more. And then it's basically redistributed off the equator towards the poles, some of which essentially sink back at lower altitudes, at polar latitudes. This upwelling has big implications for temperature because you see a cooling in the region of this upwelling, and then you have a heating at polar latitudes due to the downwelling. So there is thermodynamical processes going on, and these cooling and heating, they're in the order of plus minus 30 Kelvin. So Mars-wise, we have a truly global phenomenon going on in terms of the extent of the meridional and vertical circulation and distribution of water, basically. This is, without a global picture, it's impossible to understand this. That was the main conclusion of this research, I think. Yeah, more recently, I put some of these topics into this Exploring Mars Harsh Atmosphere Physics Today article. So every 5 years, I like writing one of these. The next one is 2029, I guess, or earlier, hopefully earlier. I have a few ideas. Maybe we can talk about it if anybody has want to team up and write a transdisciplinary article or interdisciplinary. Would be fun to do it. Right, that's pretty much it. So I summarized some of these things here, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.